Hello and welcome to Bottom Line. We have a great informational show for you today. We're going to be learning more about the American Cancer Society. I'd like to welcome my guest for today's show, Anna Montayne. She is the Senior Development Manager in the North Region. Anna, welcome to Bottom Line.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm really excited as well for some folks that may be somewhat familiar with American Cancer Society, maybe not. I thought the best way to do it is maybe to start the show off a level set to ask a little bit of the history of how the American Cancer Society came to be.
Absolutely. So, our organization is over 110 years old now, and we are the only organization fighting every type of cancer at the research, patient support, and advocacy level. So, we really are attacking cancer from every angle, and I couldn't be more proud of the work that we do. So, a lot of people will hear the American Cancer Society and think cancer research, and that is a fair assumption, but it's definitely not all that we do. Our cancer research is very, very important. We, of course, fund research that supports all different cancer types. But beyond just the why does this happen, diagnosis, treatment research, but also in the weeds of disparities, why some people are getting diagnosed at different rates than others based on marginal disparities, things like that. So our research is very in depth. It's a national endeavor, and so we've got local researchers right here in Michigan. Actually, this year we're funding 21 grants, over $12 million across organizations like University of Michigan, Michigan State University, Wayne State University, and Van Andel Institute over on the west side. But that's just one piece. So we also offer patient support services for folks both going through a cancer diagnosis, but also for their caretakers, because we know that a cancer diagnosis affects more than just the person being diagnosed. And those are things like rides to treatment, making sure that people don't have barriers to care and all they have to worry about is getting the treatment that they need. Additionally, lodging. Sometimes your treatment isn't, or your best treatment option isn't local, and you might need to travel out of state or across the state, and we support with those efforts as well. And then finally, advocacy. We are quite literally fighting cancer at the legislative level. So that means making sure that laws are in place to make sure people are protected the best way we know how against cancer. So making sure that tobacco restrictions are in place, making sure that oral chemo is covered by insurance companies. There's a whole gamut that our advocacy team is working on. So that's a very high level of our organization and the very broad work that we do.
And Anna, that's amazing and thank you. That was so clear and concise to say this is what the American Cancer Society does. This is our mission. And like you said, many understand and know it as research, but now you're also saying there's so many patient services that are out there that people might not know, the free rides and lodging, and the advocacy to be able to help, for funding and things like that. Not just funding for research, but funding for someone to be able to get, like you said, oral chemo approved, because the cost of medicine and healthcare can be debilitating to people and families.
Absolutely.
And if people are watching and then thinking in their heads, everybody thinks there might be certain cancers they're more aware of or not. Could you maybe highlight what are some of the top cancers that we're seeing here, maybe in what's going on in the United States?
Absolutely. So, breast cancer continues to be probably one of the most recognized forms of cancer, and there is a lot of attention on it, and rightfully so, right? 1 in 3 women are diagnosed, which is a terrible rate that we are trying to significantly reduce. But we have seen all kinds of shifts. The American Cancer Society annually releases our cancer facts and figures, which highly recommend if anyone is looking to get a little bit more information to head to cancer.org and look into our cancer facts and figures. But we've seen significant increases in diagnosis in younger people this year, specifically in colorectal cancer. So, anyone familiar may have realized that screening guidelines actually reduced in age this year. So, previously, it was recommended that once you hit 50, you were getting your colorectal cancer screening. We've actually reduced that age down to 45 because we are seeing younger people get diagnosed at a higher rate. And even the 45 age, we're seeing might still be a little bit high. So there is increase in younger folks getting those diagnoses, which is unfortunate. But then right here in Michigan, we know it's not the highest nationally, but the Michigan top cause of cancer is actually lung cancer. So that's something that we're really working to address here right in our state.
And and I have to ask, because I'm glad you brought up that with lung cancer, because I think sometimes people think originally, and over time I think we all get a little more educated, which hopefully today will add to that. Is that you have to smoke to get lung cancer, and then I think what we're finding out is secondhand smoke, and then also anyone who maybe has been around asbestos, some other things. Can you talk a little bit more about various folks and risks there are for what you're finding with lung cancer?
Absolutely. Lung cancer is definitely not exclusive to those smokers, although they are at a higher risk. So, if you have had any kind of exposure to tobacco smoking, whether it was yourself or a family member, a loved one, even a place of work, it's definitely recommended to talk to your doctor about, should I get screened? Am I at a higher risk? But those are also resources the American Cancer Society has readily available. So I'm going to probably drill in cancer.org today. But sometimes people don't know what questions to ask or exactly this question of, am I at a higher risk? And so there are a couple of things I can point people to. We've actually just created this year a new assessment tool called Cancer 360. It's about a 15-minute survey. You do it all online and you answer questions simply like this: are you exposed to smoke? What's your kind of working environment? How active are you? And it can give you recommendations based on those answers and things like your family history of these are things you might want to talk to your doctor about, or you might be at that age where it is time to get screened for this. But then if the recommendation is to talk to your doctor, well, what the heck do I say? Those are resources we have available on cancer.org to say these are some questions you can ask your provider to try and determine, are you at a higher risk? Do you need to start getting screened? Or are you someone that can wait until that age threshold to start getting screened? So I hope that answers your question, but I know that was a little bit more general, but really recommend everyone using this Cancer 360 tool because it's 15 minutes that could really help assess if you need to get in front of a provider.
Well, Anna, thank you for that, because it's something I made a mental note now, and that's something I want to do. But because especially if you're not sure, and that's the next question I was going to ask too is, are we seeing in the area of cancers and that? And the interesting thing you mentioned about tobacco, I know that people sometimes may forget too, like if they're chewing tobacco, there's been can be an increase in mouth cancer. So, sometimes we forget, like you said, you think of breast or lung or some other ones or prostate for men, that probably seem like it's out there in the news a little bit more, but there's other type of cancers. And I wanted to ask, are we seeing any difference between or increase in environmental factors? Because I know sometimes we think about hereditary and genetics. Sometimes that can be challenging because if we didn't ask didn't know from the grandparents, or even if your parents aren't alive, you don't know that. Sometimes you don't know your history. But I was curious if we're seeing a shift from hereditary and genetics to maybe more environmental risks.
That's a great question. And I think part of the answer to that is yes, but because we know more, right? So that's why this research is so powerful that we're doing within the American Cancer Society is we're able to address now that, it's not just tobacco that causes lung cancer. We are learning different pieces that can aid in a cancer diagnosis, which can feel unfortunate, but knowledge is power. So while the answer may be yes, we are seeing risks go up in different areas, and it could be environmental, it could be hereditary. It's because we have more information and the ability to diagnose. So, really, based on your health and history, we recommend talking to your doctor, getting that annual physical. And I know some people you had even just teased, this is a good mental note for me that I need to get in front of someone, maybe ask some of these questions. I have heard of so many people recently tying it around their birthday. You don't forget your birthday, make a couple appointments, and really spend your time taking care of yourself that way. Because at the end of the day, it's self care, right? It's maybe not as fun as a massage or getting your hair and nails done, but it could save your life. And it's worth just that 20 minutes to make an appointment, talk to your provider, and see what's best recommended for you.
And I think that's great advice, Anna, because like you said, just the 15 minutes Cancer 360 and take that, and it just kind of gives you a baseline and gives you something then you can take with yourself to go to the doctor and ask some things without getting, get some help from the doctor who's more an expertise, because sometimes we don't want to base everything on what we see on the internet. So it's best, like you said, to go to your provider yearly around your birthday is a great idea. And it's one thing I want to mention too that I even myself forget about is maybe people don't realize there's such things called blood cancer. Can you describe what that is for people who may not be familiar with that type of cancer?
Oh, yeah, there are several types of blood cancer. So, I mean, it's internal. Unfortunately, you know, we're still learning what causes different types of blood cancer. Of course, leukemia is probably one of the most well known, but it's definitely not the only kind of blood cancer out there. Multiple myeloma is also a bit on the rise. So, cancer can attack in multiple different ways. But that's why I'm really proud of the work of the American Cancer Society, that we aren't focused on certain types. It is quite literally all types of cancer. So if you're looking to learn a little bit more about blood cancer, again, we can direct you to cancer.org and we can get a little bit more in the weeds. And with every cancer type, not just blood cancer, but you can find, I want to learn more about this type of cancer. And we've got the traits, the diagnoses, what happens, what does treatment look like. So the different levels of each cancer type is outlined on cancer.org, which is a fabulous resource.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful, because
Mhm.
it's like you said, cancer.org, that's a one-stop shop to really help on everything, learning, about research, learning about programs, also learning about how the advocacy, is being done. As we look at things going forward, and that from the programs that you have, what would you highlight as some of the various programs that people might want to think about or know that are being offered? Or maybe even if maybe what we can talk about are the ones that are being used the most, and then if
Yeah.
there's any programs that are used the least, because maybe people don't realize that they're there.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for asking. Our programs are so fabulous, but only if people know to use them and know that they're available, right? So, one of the things is, we've been discussing, yes, we can direct to our website and whatnot, but when we're talking about questions, or even for folks who maybe have received a cancer diagnosis and just don't know what to do with this information, or we're so overwhelmed in the moment that, gosh, I forgot to ask my provider this. Like, I don't know what to just do with all this information. We also have an 800 number that is manned by real people 24/7, 365 days a year. So we have trained professionals ready to talk to anyone who calls us with any type of question. So we see people calling and saying, gosh, what should I ask my insurance? Or my partner just got diagnosed. How can I be the best support system for them? Or what resources are available in my area? We unfortunately see the highest number of calls at local time about 2 to 4 a.m. and closer to the holidays when people don't know how to bring it up to their families. It's Christmas and I still want to make it magical, but I need to talk to someone about this. And the American Cancer Society is there for you to have that conversation. So, highly recommend that number. It's available on our website, but I will just say it here so anyone can find it, and that's 800-227-2345. Again, 365 days a year, 24/7, and available in over 200 languages. So really, really want to make sure people know that that resource is available. But in terms of some of our other very utilized resources, we know transportation is the number one barrier to care, that people don't have the ability to lean on a family member or a loved one or themselves to be able to transport themselves back and forth from treatment. And we don't want anyone to not get the treatment that they need to survive cancer because of a transportation issue. So we have a program called Road to Recovery that people can enter their appointments, and local volunteers will pick them up, take them to and from their treatment, and make sure that they have that access that they need. But that is a huge need we actually have in the Metro Detroit area. we are unable to fulfill all rides at the moment, which is not a statistic we love to share. We definitely want to make sure that we are able to provide every single person who needs a ride that accessibility. So, if anyone is looking to support and volunteer opportunities, highly recommend learning more about our Road to Recovery program. And then finally, one of the biggest programs we have nationally as well is our Hope Lodge, which is 30 institutions across the nation that offer free lodging to cancer patients and a caretaker, so no one is traveling alone. But these places have laundry, food, accessibility to gym, accessibility to transportation for their treatments, and making sure, again, that people are staying somewhere that they're comfortable, that they're feeling at home, and they're not worried about, gosh, I need to be in a hotel for months at a time because of my treatment, because that's a financial burden that people just should not have to worry about. If you get a cancer diagnosis, the only thing you should be focused on is treating that diagnosis and taking care of yourself. So those are some of our high level projects or services that we offer. However, if you're looking for something more local, you can go right to our website too, and we've got a whole tool where you can type in your zip code and what you need, and you will be directed to local resources near you.
Well, and Anna, that's just amazing. One, like you said, the 24/7 hotline to answer any questions. And it's
Yeah.
interesting too when you mentioned the times that are pretty busy, like 2 to 4, AM. And sometimes you think 2 to 4 a.m., but I think when you said that, I think, oh my goodness, it's the middle of the
People
night
can't
and you're
sleep.
worried. And what
Exactly.
better way than to know there's somebody out there who you could at least talk to, and then know they could help you to direct it. Maybe the next morning you can talk or get a resource that you need.
Mhm.
The free rides, I think that's wonderful. And like you said, it's unfortunate more people need rides. So maybe someone who might be watching the show or might have a friend, might have someone parent who might have some free time that could help give rides for people, because it's something I'm sure they would appreciate if they needed it. And then free lodging, to be able to, like you said, that's the thought I would have if I'm a caregiver. I'm going with somebody and you're staying there and you're trying to be in a hotel room or something, but here you have some place that does laundry and even a gym or
Exactly.
transportation. Those things really, I think what the American Cancer Society is doing is just like you said, really say we want you to focus on getting better and beating cancer. And all those things, I think, are ways you're just trying to take stress off their plates.
Absolutely. We want everyone to be able to focus exclusively on preventing, detecting,
Yeah,
treating, and surviving cancer. So, our job is to take away any of those barriers to care to make sure that people can just focus on the most important
right.
things, which is their health.
Is there any services that you see that are being offered that aren't maybe used as much as maybe you would think, or maybe because they're just less known, or
That's a good question, and I wouldn't say there's services that, like, gosh, we can't believe this isn't being used. We just want to make sure that people know that they're available. So as we're talking about services, obviously these come to mind, right? Of yes, we want to make sure people have these rides, they have the transportation, they have the lodging. But even as simple as understanding the screening guidelines, those are things that we're really trying to make sure that people have the access and the understanding of that. It's common household knowledge that once I am 45, I'm going to start getting my colorectal cancer screening. So I think that's a message that we are just continuing to reiterate and make sure that people understand what those suggestions are, because the best way to prevent or treat and survive cancer is to detect it early. But one thing, it's not a program per se, but would love to shed some light on is actually an ongoing study within research. Research for us is not done exclusively in a lab and petri dishes and things like that. Over the course of the American Cancer Society's history, we've done several cohort studies where we're working with individuals to understand, what's going on in their lifetime, their health story, so that we can assess and make better plans for the future. One of our ongoing cohort studies is called the Voices of Black Women. So we know that Black women have been disproportionately marginalized in the cancer community. So we know Black women are diagnosed at a higher, or excuse me, are diagnosed at the same rate as white women when it comes to breast cancer. However, mortality rates are higher, and that is unacceptable. So one of the studies we have going on right now, this Voices of Black Women study, is to address that disparity, understand why that is happening. So we are in the process of recruiting 100,000 Black women across the country. We're hoping to recruit 3,000 just here in Michigan to share their voices and understand what's going on at the ages between 25 and 55 that this disparity is happening and how can we close that gap. So this is something that we know Black women haven't historically been well represented in medical studies, which is why it's so important that we're doing this and that we're getting the message out there. But we are actively working to recruit and need support to do so. So if you are someone who identifies as a Black woman between the ages of 25 and 55, or can help recruit women in that demographic who have not had a cancer history except for basal cell skin cancer. Um, we would love to talk to you about recruiting and getting active in the Voices of Black Women study, or even helping us share the message as an ambassador to make sure that we recruit the appropriate amount of women to make sure that this is a successful study.
And that's so important. So hopefully if anybody is watching, they might want to themselves get involved, or again, like you said, know someone who might and could kind of forward them to you guys to, if they want to be part of the study, which is to me really important for someone, because it sounds like it won't be, too hard for someone to participate and do that. And you're going to be helping the next future generations, which is wonderful, because like you said, we know a lot more today than we did before. And it was due to studies like this. It's due to people offering, like you said, not just Petri dish research, where you're actually finding out from people and different nationalities and different things that, can help, the future of cancer. And what, this is interesting. And before we kind of transition to maybe some of the fundraising and volunteering that maybe people can do, the one thing I found very fascinating is, as you said, over 100 years. And it was interesting to me that, and I'm going to pop out a few numbers here that I just saw on the website that I thought was really fascinating, is that chemotherapy became known in 1947. Sometimes you think, oh, it just is the 60s or the 70s, even PAP tests for women, 1948. 1954, smoking was determined to cause cancer. And then in 73, the mammography became, a tool to be used. And then, of course, one thing that warmed my heart to see was in 2022, a Nobel Prize, because, I just can't imagine that. It's nice to see American Cancer Society getting recognized for all this amazing work they're doing, all the programs they're offering, the services, people like yourself, that you can just see your passion to want to help people to either detect, avoid, or if they have cancer, be able to be treated and cured. So congratulations on all those things that has been done due to research and due to people's efforts and studies. It's amazing.
Thank you. We're so proud of our accomplishments, but we will not be done working until we are literally out of jobs at the American Cancer Society.
I know, isn't that nice?
Say.
It's always nice to say, trying to work myself out of a job, and in that case, kind of stamp out cancer and that.
Exactly.
What I want to do is not lose focus also on how everybody can help the American Cancer Society, ourselves. One, of course, I know you mentioned was the research. One could be if someone wants to, volunteer their time for free ride to help people, provide transportations and rides. Can you mention some other ways? I know there's things that people could donate a car. They also could maybe put something into their wills or trusts, for the future. Can you talk a little bit about it, what an individual can do to help volunteer or provide things to the American Cancer Society?
Absolutely. We have limitless ways to support. So the first is always your time. So as I mentioned earlier, Road to Recovery is a program that we are actively recruiting volunteers, especially in the Metro Detroit area. So folks who are able to give an hour, 2 hours more a day, if whenever it fits in their schedule, to offer rides to and from treatment for cancer patients, is a huge win for the programs that we're executing at the American Cancer Society. Additionally, I mentioned our advocacy arm. We are always looking for new members to ACS CAN, which is the Cancer Action Network. And those are folks who are helping us lobby at that legislative level. And so within our CAN network, members are given resources and opportunities to work with their local legislators to make sure that our voices are being heard and that ACS is top of mind when working on policies and things like that. So members are always welcome. ACScan.org, highly recommend checking that out. You mentioned donors and wills and trusts. Talk to your financial advisor. ACS can be left as a gift if, in wills and things like that. But also, we've got plenty of different events to get involved with too. Sometimes it's a little bit more fun to get in person and experience it with other supporters. So, as we're heading into the back half of the year, we are definitely heading into what we call pink season. So, we will have Making Strides Against Breast Cancer walks across the state of Michigan, across the country. Highly recommend checking those out. In Detroit, we have one of our largest in the nation, where we'll expect over 10,000 guests to come out to Cornerball Park on Saturday, October 11th. And it's an opportunity to come out, walk with survivors and other supporters, and even corporate supporters, to come make a difference in the fight against breast cancer. Also, that's an opportunity to volunteer as well. We always love event volunteers who can help us make these events a huge success. And then some other ways to get involved on the event or space. We actually have a brand new event in Detroit launching this September 29th. We will have our Taste of Hope Detroit, which is a chef's competition. And it's a ticketed event. Folks can come out, enjoy chef bites from 10 different Metro Detroit area chefs, and support the fight against cancer, specifically ACS-funded cancer research, because we know that is so important to continue funding those research efforts. So highly recommend checking out events near you, which can also be done at cancer.org. So you can type in your zip code, look at events near you, and be directed to the appropriate event staff lead. Taste of Hope is one that I actually oversee. So if you'd like to work with me on getting in the room, tasting some of these great chef dishes, or even raising your hand to volunteer or get your company involved, I'd love to work with you.
Yeah. And that's another great thing, as you mentioned, just getting involved. Of course, that sounds very tasty and very, if anybody's watching it, probably that might be nice to either participate or, help volunteer in that. But I think it just shows that how the American Cancer Society, and especially here in the Detroit area, is just moving forward and offering, new and interesting, fun ways to do fundraising and getting involved and so on. And can they reach out to cancer.org if somebody is watching and say, I'd like to do something at my company, or I'd like to, do something with my church group or my group of friends or whatever. They can just go to cancer.org and be able to try to find out someone that they could contact then to get the ball rolling.
Absolutely. Even through our chat function, you can say, I want the ball rolling. But if anyone's interested in the Metro Detroit area and wants to reach out to me directly, it's just my name, anna.montayne@cancer.org. Send me an email and I'll make sure to connect you with the right local staff for us to make sure that you are connected to the right person to support the way that you're looking to support. But we try and make it as accessible as possible, that everyone is supporting in a meaningful way to them, because the fight against cancer, unfortunately, affects everyone. So we are looking for everyone to get involved in the way that makes sense for them.
Yes. And, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because somebody watching might say, hey, can I go there to also figure out where there's a support group? And I know I'm probably going to answer this and you're shaking your head that of course there is. So hopefully they don't feel left out too, because as you said, the caregivers really need help as well. So.
Absolutely. No, our resources are for both those who are going through treatment and diagnosis, and those caregivers who are, supporting your loved ones through it, because cancer touches all of us. And so the resources are there for all of us as well.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for being on Bottom Line today and sharing all this great information. And I also want to say that people, the Cancer 360, quiz and is able to do out there, kind of survey to help yourself take something then to your doctor to help with that. So again, Anna, thank you for being with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to thank our audience for watching. And again, I wish everyone the best of health. I'm Cindy Kainz.